afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Hanging Lab Code. Please kindly introduce yourself to us as well as we can go ahead with a few questions.
Thank you for having me on your channel. My name is Isaac Kwame Badu, and I am a volunteer in the Entomology Museum of the Department of Conservation Biology and Entomology.
Okay, so please tell us about entomology. What is the scope of entomology?
So entomology is the study of insects. There are several millions of species of insects that exist globally. And then we as entomologists study them to find ways of controlling them for those that are pests or harmful to us. For those that are beneficial to us, we find ways of conserving them within their environment to make sure that they can keep providing us the benefits that they give to us.
Okay, so you made mention of conserving the pests which give benefits and then controlling the pests which are not of benefits. So what are some of the ways you conserve? What are some of the ways and also what are some of the pests that you conserve? And also what are some of the pests that they are harmful that you control? And what are some of the ways you control them?
Okay, so for insects, for an insect to be called as a pest, then that insect is harmful. So harmful insects are the ones we refer to as pests. But then other insects that are not harmful are not pests. Okay, so once we have established that, so for beneficial insects, they live in different parts of the natural environment. There are some that are ground dwelling. There are some that are arboreal, they live on trees. There are some that live in our forest litter. There are some that live in our grasslands. Yes, so all insects do not live in the same place. They have different preferences for different types of habitats within the broader ecosystem. So to be able to conserve insects in their natural environment, it means that we have to conserve the habitats within which they live. So it's more of an indirect method strategy. Once you conserve the habitat within which the insects live, and then you provide the resources that they need to survive, then you are assured of protecting or conserving the insects that live within those habitats.
Okay, so how you conserve and how you are explaining to me that you conserve these insects which are beneficial with regards to your habitat, meaning is it that entomology is more of a field work?
Yes, so entomology is not only about field work. So there are several aspects of entomology. What we are discussing now is just looking at the conservation aspect of entomology, not even related to only insects, but then it can be conservation of plants, conservation of water bodies. So conservation as general talks about conserving natural resources, of which the insects form part of that natural resources. But entomology as a subject of the study of insects, there is fieldwork components, there is laboratory components. So there are some studies on insects that we would have to conduct them within the lab, and then there are some that we would have to conduct within the field. So the entire entomology is not just related to fieldwork. There are so many other aspects that is done within the laboratories.
Okay, you spoke about research on some insects. So what are some of the studies, like a few studies that they've been taking with regards to insects?
Okay, so there are so many insects that there are so many studies that have actually been conducted on insects, but I would use what I have studied along my stay within the university throughout my various degrees, and then to use as examples. So for my undergraduate studies, for instance, my final year project, I looked at blowflies in tree. We call them once napoli. Yes, so they are beneficial to us in the sense that they are able to the colonizers of carrion. Carrion is any dead animal or dead meat or something. They are part of the animals that are able to colonize these carrion, and then they help in the decomposition of the carrion. So in my study, I was looking at how, first of all, I was looking at their life cycle on the carrion. How long does it take for them to move to the egg stage, for them to even visit in the first place, and then lay eggs, the egg hatch into larvae, the larvae hatch into, develops into pupa, and the pupa develops into adult. This was important because it has applications for forensic science. So in forensic science, the whole idea is to be able to determine the time of death. But then one of the key things that they use to detect the time of death is which insects have visited the dead body since the time the person died and then when the body was discovered. So then if we know the life cycle of the blowfly, if we go to the body and then we see that the insect has reached the larval stage on the dead person, we can be able to, since we have knowledge of the life cycle of the blowfly, we can sort of calculate to determine how long it has been since the person died till when we discovered the body. So that's one of the applications of that study. The other study was also to rear the insect on different protein diets. This was because the larvae is very rich in proteins. So a number of studies have been able to utilize them to feed poultry and also as fish feed. You know, in this day and age, we are looking for cheaper sources of food for our poultry and then our fish. So I explored how well the larvae was going to develop on different diets. So I looked at a protein-based diet. I also looked at a plant-based diet, and then I also mixed with the protein and then the plant-based diet to see how well they would grow on these protein-based food substrates, so that we can recommend those food substrates as food for the larvae, so that we can rear them in large quantities to feed our poultry and then our fish. So those were two applications of the study that I did in undergraduate. For my master's, I looked at, I had to make a switch. So I studied dragonflies and damselflies. I looked at what factors was affecting them within their natural environment, and then how different activities that we as humans are undertaking in the environment is affecting their distribution and then their presence in various water bodies. So this is important because these insects are bioindicators. When we say bioindicators, it means that they are able to detect the quality of the environment. So there are so many species of them. So when we come to a particular site or particular habitat, the kind of species of dragonflies and damselflies that are there gives us information on the nature of the habitat as to whether it is quality or not quality. So my study was to look at which factors was important for them. Okay, so once I was able to identify those factors, I looked at how these factors were affecting them, their presence and absence in various water bodies that I surveyed. So based on that, I can be able to recommend that if we want to keep our environment clean, we have to focus on these factors. That is per the study. I was able to identify which of them are important. So when we focus on those factors, then to measure as to whether our interventions are successful or not, we can then look at which dragonflies and damselflies are present in those habitats after we have implemented the solutions, to see whether our solutions are indeed working or they are not working. So these are just some few studies that, per my personal experience, I can share with you. Of course, there are so many studies that have
Okay,
been
it's
conducted on
quite
insects.
informative, and I'm learning a lot personally. I didn't know those blue flies. They are very important like that, as in helping in the side of investigating. I never knew, because we always see them and then it's really pisses you off. I didn't know that they are very very helpful. But then we spoke of the dragonflies being bioindicators. I wanted to ask, when they are able to indicate that this environment is maybe quality or is not quality, how is it applied in other fields?
Okay, so in other fields, we can look at uh, protecting our water bodies,
Okay.
for instance. So the presence or absence of species of dragonflies is able to tell us as to whether that water body is indeed clean or not. We don't have to then take samples to send to the lab to measure and all of those things. Once we know the totality of the species that are present over there, we can extract that information to be confident to know whether this particular site is clean or not. But then there are so many applications of dragonflies in general in other fields. But with respect to they being bioindicators, that is one of the ways that we can.
Okay, fast forward, let's move on to the challenges you faced as a student throughout your student journey in studying conservation biology and entomology. The challenges.
So one of the general challenges of studying entomology in Ghana or Africa is that growing up, we have a low sense of culture when it comes to protecting our natural environment or studying nature. I'm not sure anybody growing up in Ghana will be able to confidently go to the parents and then tell them that I want to go and study insects in the future. I want to study plants in the future or something. We are all interested in the applied sciences. I want to be a nurse, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a pharmacist, and all of that. But when it comes to studying about nature, we sort of shy away from it because we don't understand the importance of nature. So because of that, any program that has to do with the study of nature, people disregard the importance of that program. So that is one of the general challenges. Immediately you mention the program that you came to study, you have a lot of people throwing so many questions at you and then making mockery of you. If I am to sort of make a post on Twitter, for instance, that I studied entomology and then I am looking for a job, you can assess the nature of your comments that will come. Why did you go to school to go and study this job? Why will you go and do this? Why will you go and do that? So the misconceptions is too much. And then that is one of the challenges that not just entomology, but any program within the natural sciences.
So as far as entomology is talking about nature, and nature is us, I mean the people, and we are all looking up to some sustainable development goals. So let's speak about two sustainable development goals that entomologists can help promote it by 2030.
Okay. So off the top of my head, I don't remember the sustainable goals, each of their numbers and the specific goals. But then there's a goal that talks about food security, for instance. So for food security, one of the major challenges against food farming in the world is insects, because insects are one of the major pests of most of our food crops that we grow. So it means that we, as entomologists, we are there to find lasting solutions to these pests. And then once we are able to find those solutions for them, we can ensure that we are growing a lot of crops to feed the growing population. Aside the pests, pollinators also are required to pollinate the crops. We can grow the crops, there will be no pests to attack them. But then in the absence of pollinators, they won't bear fruit. So while we are controlling the pest, we are also maintaining a natural environment to ensure that our pollinators are in abundance so that they can also pollinate our crops for us effectively. So
Okay,
that
so
is, yeah.
if I should ask, let's say there is a farmland and then they recognize the pollinators are not coming.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, there is no production. What will entomologists do?
Okay, so in that case, what we advise is that it could be that there are practices that the farmers are implementing that is driving the pollinators away. For instance, excessive use of pesticides. Pesticides are meant to target pests, but at certain concentrations, they exceed their target and then they go for the beneficial insects. So the farmers may be using the pesticides in excessive concentrations. They may also not be spraying at the right time. For instance, if you spray very early in the morning, that is when pollinators visit your farm. So there is that high chance of killing the pollinators rather than your target pests. But then if you are to spray later within the day, the pollinators will have left. Also, we also encourage farmers to maintain natural environment around their farm because it is the natural environment that hosts these pollinators to be able to come to the field to pollinate. And then in another solution, we can also introduce pollinators into the farm. So for instance, bees, for instance, can be managed, can be kept. You can keep them in hives. They go and forage and then they come back into your hive. So when you introduce hives into a farmland, the bees will pollinate, will visit the plants. They will pick pollen and nectar. They come back into the hive. They produce honey and then they pollinate the farm for the farm. So the farmer has even two streams of income from that intervention.
Okay, so you're speaking on the bee and producing a hive for the bee and then the bee producing honey. Then it means I should say they form part of the beneficiary pest.
Beneficial insects. Yes.
So okay,
yes.
so give us the 2 or 3 beneficial insects and then 2 or 3 pests.
Pests. Okay.
Yes.
So for beneficial insects, the pollinators, bees are one of them. Butterflies are also one of the major pollinators. And then I'll mention my dragonflies because I studied them. They are bioindicators, so they are also beneficial insects. For pests, those that come as there is a fall armyworm that's a field pest that attacks maize and a number of the cereals. There is also aphids. Aphids are also one of the pests that attack a number of our crops. There is also there are some cocoa pests that I was trying to, because they are popular. I was trying to, but I've forgotten their name. Locusts are also pests that attack.
Anyway, it's been quite informative. Personally, I've learned a lot. All these are, I was thinking every insect is having a negative impact on the environment. I did not being today, I wouldn't have learned. And I hope others too will learn from this interview. Thank you so much for having me here, Mr. Isaac. And then it was my honor to have you on my channel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.